Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Last week, the Premier went on radio and made the claim that BC teachers don't care about class size and class composition. They just care about the money. I don't know where, Honourable Speaker, where the Premier gets her information. I, on Monday, went to the schools that my children graduated from, and I talked to the teachers that helped shape their minds and shape their character into the fine, upstanding citizens they are today. And not one of those teachers, Honourable Speaker, mentioned money. Every single one of them talked about how they want to give more to their kids than they're able to, but they're constrained by the absence of any coherent class size and class composition language in their collective agreements. And that's been the case, Honourable Speaker, for 12 years. Children who started in grade 1 when the now Premier was then the Minister of Education have had a disrupted education, and now they look at the last month of their time in the K-12 system, and there's more disruption. So my question through you to the Premier is, how is inflaming the tensions that already exist helping us get to a collective agreement that will ensure that our kids get the best education they possibly can in the public school system?
This is a very, very challenging time for parents, for students in particular, but also for teachers in the classroom. There's been a lot of confusion about what's happening out there, and as we go out and we attempt to get an agreement between the government and the teachers' union, we need to decide we want to do that by bargaining, by sitting down at the table and talking about the bargainable issues like class size, class composition, pay raises for teachers, and all of the other issues that are there. That should happen without disrupting classrooms for children. It can happen. It's what all of us would like to see happen. Let's get to the bargaining table. Let's sit down. Let's bargain hard. And let's prove that after 30 years of dysfunction in bargaining between government and the BCTF, that we can sit down, bargain an agreement like adults, and leave the kids out of it.
Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplemental.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. And if only it was bargaining by adults, maybe we'd be in a better position. But the record of the government in power since 2001 is far from that. The record of the government in power is stripping collective agreements, stripping agreements that were duly signed by the employer and the employee. We now have confusion, as the Premier rightly points out, but the confusion is coming from the Minister of Education and his obscure determination that a lockout was in the best interest of the bargaining process. It did not include, Honourable Speaker, any consultation with the actual employer under the Labour Code, duly elected trustees. So we have trustees in this province, every corner of this province, administrators, teachers, parents, still getting explanations from the minister 7 days after he made the determination. So why don't we, Honourable Speaker, through you to the Premier, instead of heightening tension, instead of adding to the confusion, why won't this government recognize that stripping rights, taking away the constitutional rights of teachers, not once but twice, and provoking a strike is not in the best interest of our children, our families, or our province?
Madam Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government's success in negotiating with public sector workers is unparalleled. We have negotiated we have successfully negotiated tentative or ratified agreements with almost half of the public service. We have been successful when we've sat down and we've negotiated, we've rolled up our sleeves and recognized that our hard-working public servants, whether they are nurses or doctors or police officers or teachers, deserve a raise. They've earned it. It needs to be an affordable raise. It needs to be one that's fair across the public sector. But we know we can get there. The only way to do it, though, is to decide that we want to bargain, that the teachers union and the government want to bargain this agreement the same way we've bargained it with over 40% of the public sector. That's sitting down, rolling up our sleeves, and working hard to get to an agreement.
Leader of the Opposition on a further supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The Premier talks about the dysfunction of the system over 30 years, of over one-third of that time under the watch of the BC Liberals. The dysfunction started, I would argue, Honourable Speaker, and I think just about everyone agrees with me, certainly the Supreme Court does, not once but twice. It started when that Premier, then the Minister, stripped contracts and took away So we've said, we've heard the Premier say that she's got trouble with the teachers. They're greedy. That was the first thing out of her mouth. Then it was, let's get them in a room and lock the door till I come up with a deal. And the latest intervention on behalf of students and parents and teachers across British Columbia is, if I don't have a deal by sundown Saturday, there's going to be heck to pay, or the actual quote was, or else. So my question, it begs the question, through you to the Premier, if there's not a deal in 48 hours as you have mandated, what's the or else?
Madam Premier.
Thank you. In 30 years, in almost every agreement that has been settled between the government and the teachers union, in 30 years, governments have legislated almost every single one of them after job action has erupted into our classrooms. That member conveniently forgets that he was an advisor to a government that legislated teachers back to work because of the dysfunction in the way that we bargain. We need to fix that. We need to restructure the way that we bargain between teachers and government. We need to work on getting to a 10 years of labour peace so that students will be protected in the long term and that teachers will be guaranteed to be treated fairly. I believe that this is what most classroom teachers want. This is what government wants. This is something that I believe is going to mean we are able to move forward, improve our education system, and make sure that kids in the future don't end up as they have almost every time for the last 30 years, including when that member was advising an NDP government, that children don't end up in the middle of these disputes because they shouldn't be there.
Recognizing the member for Victoria, Swan Lake.
Thank you, Madam. Well, Madam Speaker, you're going to have to forgive British Columbians for wondering just exactly what this government does want. In the last 24 hours, we've had the Minister of Education say he wants a settlement by the end of June. Then we've heard the Premier say there better be something in place in 3 days or else. Is there any wonder that parents across British Columbia and teachers are utterly confused by government's escalation this week of locking teachers out from their daily duties as teachers? There's a 12-year record of acrimony, Madam Speaker. 12-year record of acrimony, and
The members will come to order. Please continue.
You know, Madam Speaker, it's only the government side, unfortunately, that has the chance to put things on a different footing in British Columbia, but they're continuing the pattern that only they know best, which is a pattern of confrontation instead of negotiation, imposing legislation, and the courts have shown, Madam Speaker, that that is a disaster. That is no way ahead for British Columbia. British Columbians need a commitment, Madam Speaker, that this government, this Premier, will stop creating confusion, will yield on their agenda of retribution and find a way to negotiate ahead so BC parents can have their kids back in our schools? Will the minister just commit today to stop unfairly blaming teachers for everything and set aside the threats, help facilitate a settlement so that there's actually an alternative in British Columbia to the chaos that this government has created in our public schools?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am amazed at the righteous or unrighteous indignation from the member opposite, and I'd like to bring some facts to his attention. The accusation that the government has provoked something, I'm going to read from a press release that was put out by your friends at the BCTF through you, Madam Speaker, on April the 17th. And here's some facts. During Stage 1 job action, their members were instructed by the BCTF not to undertake any mandated supervision of students outside of regularly scheduled classes, except as set out under Essential Services Order, not to be at a work site 1 hour before commencement of instructional time and 1 hour at the end of instructional time, Madam Speaker, and not to attend any meetings with management other than meetings of worksite joint health and safety. Madam Speaker, I'd like to know why the members opposite, when this press release came out, when the BCTF launched the action, didn't pick up the phone and call their friends and say, why are you provoking this? Why are you putting students in the middle? Let's keep classes functioning while we're still at the table trying to negotiate.
I do, Madam Speaker, and I think we would all agree here that a lockout order that requires 5 statements of clarification and Q&As is the very definition of confusion and incompetence. I want to ask the Minister about another area in this dispute that he has deliberately muddied the waters on in negotiations. It's the issue of class size and composition. It's a central issue in this dispute. It's critical. The Minister told the media on the weekend that, quote, all the studies in the world say that class size and composition don't have any impact on learning outcomes. Well, Honourable Speaker, we went to the Legislative Library to see if some of those studies available in the world were here. And luckily, unlike many schools across British Columbia, the legislature still has librarians, Madam Speaker. And I now have a stack of research. Madam Speaker, that I'm only too happy to share with the Minister that shows definitively that class size and composition does impact learning outcomes. Will the Minister just admit, Madam Speaker, in order to find a way ahead in this dispute, that his government's ignoring of the key issues like class size and composition is one of the reasons why his government has been utterly unable to resolve this dispute and it drags on?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, 6 weeks of silence after the BCTF initiated strike action, Madam Speaker. 6 weeks of silence. Now we have indication that we are at fault. But, Madam Speaker, I'll tell you this, Madam Speaker, through you. 6 weeks of no response from the members opposite. Madam Speaker, we now have children.
Members. Members,
Madam Speaker, we do regret that children and parents and communities are caught in the middle of this dispute. We have been very clear, Madam Speaker, that it was the strike action initiated by the BCTF 6 weeks ago that brought us to where we are today. Madam Speaker, we have been at the table. This government, through the Employers Association, has made significant moves to get a negotiated settlement, a reduction in term, a $1,200 signing bonus, movement on the salary grid, Madam Speaker, and to suggest that we are not focused on students' learning outcomes, not focused on a negotiated settlement, Madam Speaker, is truly the height of hypocrisy by the members opposite.